Today, we're opening a new dossier on the Runcandel clan to follow the story of a man who died in disgrace, only to wake up at the very start of his journey. Since this is the first part of our series, sit back and enjoy as we watch a forgotten son reclaim his destiny. The Runcandel clan stands as the apex of martial power, dominating half the known world through a trinity of absolute principles: combat, conquer, control. Members of this lineage are genetically predisposed to superior physiques and overwhelming talent. To be born a Runcandel is to be born a ruler. Jin Runcandel, the youngest son, was introduced into this hierarchy with high expectations. During the selection ceremony, a ritual determining a child's fate, the infant Jin grasped Bersada, the sword of the family patriarch. This action was interpreted as a prophecy of future leadership. However, the subsequent years proved this projection to be a statistical error. Jin displayed zero aptitude for swordsmanship. In a family where martial prowess is the sole currency of worth, he was reclassified as the greatest disgrace in Runcandel history. The clan's internal ecosystem is predatory. Jin's elder brothers, viewing him as a blemish on their lineage, subjected him to routine physical and psychological enforcement. When Jin attempted to compensate for his lack of talent with theoretical study and relentless practice with a wooden sword, his siblings intervened. They destroyed his equipment and violently reminded him of his station. Despite the assault, Jin adhered to the belief that sufficient labor would eventually yield recognition. This hypothesis was incorrect. At the age of 25, the Runcandel clan formally purged him from their ranks. Banishment, however, removed the institutional blinders placed upon him. While wandering aimlessly, Jin encountered a magician who identified a critical oversight in the Runcandel assessment. Jin possessed a transcendent talent for magic, a discipline strictly forbidden within his sword-obsessed family. 3 years after his exile, while cultivating this magical aptitude, a higher power intervened. The mana Jin manipulated resonated with the shadows, summoning Soldert, the god of shadows. The deity revealed the root cause of Jin's martial failure. It was not a lack of talent, but external sabotage. Jin had been afflicted by the Bladed Illusion, a curse designed to suppress swordsmanship potential. Soldert proposed a contract. In exchange for becoming his contractor, the deity would nullify the curse and grant Jin dominion over shadows. Upon acceptance, the constraints on Jin's body shattered. He grasped a sword and found the weight negligible. The suppression was gone. By synthesizing his newfound shadow abilities, his high-tier magic, and his unlocked sword talent, Jin evolved into a magic swordsman. He had finally achieved the overwhelming power required of his bloodline. The correction came too late. Moments after this breakthrough, Jin's fatality failed. He cogged blood, his body paralyzed by an unseen force. As his vision faded, he perceived armored figures in the distance. He died with the regret of obtaining power he would never utilize. Then, the timeline reset. Sensory input returned. Jin found himself staring at a field of swords under a blue sky. He was no longer a dying adult, but an infant. He had regressed to the day of his 1-year-old selection ceremony. The legendary sword Bersada stood before him, just as it had in the original timeline. Possessing the memories of his failure, the knowledge of his magic, and the truth of his potential, the youngest master of the Runcandel clan prepared to make a new choice. The immediate aftermath of the selection ceremony triggered a clan-wide reassessment. The infant Jin Runcandel reached not for a toy or a training blade, but for Bersada, the symbolic weapon of the patriarch. This deviation from protocol stunned the assembly. The patriarch, Jin Runcandel, observed the anomaly and issued an immediate directive. The ceremony was concluded, and the subject was exiled to the Storm Castle. 6 years elapsed. Confined within the Storm Castle, Jin Runcandel awaited the mandatory age of 10 to exit seclusion. Now 7 years old, the subject maintained a facade of boredom while quietly assessing his retention of past memories. The isolation was interrupted by the arrival of the Daytona and Hachima twins, the 11th and 12th sons of the clan. The twins, aged 9, initiated a crude hierarchy check. They slaughtered a pet bird belonging to the household and presented the carcass to Jin, intending to instill fear and enforce their status as superior siblings. They mocked Jin's lack of reaction, interpreting his silence as submission. This was a calculation error. When the twins demanded the location of Bersada, Jin broke his silence. He ordered them to cease their noise. As the twins reacted to this insubordination, Jin utilized his regressed combat experience. He did not rely on the brute force of a child but on precision. Dark energy, invisible to the untrained eye, coated his grasp. He seized one brother by the collar and struck the other. The engagement was one-sided. The supposed duns of the family dismantled 2 older combatants with brutal efficiency, leaving them bloodied and unconscious on the floor. The disturbance drew the attention of the Storm Castle's guardian knight, Khan. Upon entering the room, Khan observed the unconscious twins and the unharmed Jin. When questioned, Jin provided a falsified report, claiming the brothers had fought amongst themselves until mutual collapse. Khan, a veteran observer, identified the falsehood immediately. The injuries were inconsistent with a mutual brawl. More fastidiously, Khan detected a residual energy signature that did not align with standard aura, Suspecting the presence of Mana, Kun chose not to confront Jin directly. Instead, he removed the unconscious twins from the premises, discarding them into the heavy rain outside the castle walls. His priority shifted from guardianship to reporting. He requested a horse to ride for the main estate. From the castle window, Jin monitored Kun's departure. He deduced that the knight was traveling to report to the patriarch. Internally, Jin confirmed the nature of the power he had wielded. It was not simple mana, but shadow energy. Proof that his contract with the god soldier remained valid in this timeline. Furthermore, a specific perk of this contract, curse immunity, had neutralized the blighted illusion. The affliction that had stunted his growth in his previous life, the obstacles that once defined his failure were now removed. Jin Runcandel prepared himself for the inevitable scrutiny of his father. Kun arrived at the main estate and delivered his report to Jin Runcandel. The news that the youngest son had incapacitated the Toma twins elicited a reaction from the patriarch. It was not anger, but validation. The patriarch's interest was piqued by the sudden spike in the subject's capability. Jin issued a mobilization order. He commanded the assembly of the flag bearers. The response was disproportionate to the event. 7 flag bearers, the elite commanders of the Runcandel forces, along with 200 knights, gathered in full ceremonial armor. The massive column moved out, shaking the ground as they marched toward the storm castle. The entire military way of the clan was shifting simply to inspect a 7-year-old child. The era of the youngest son's incompetence had officially ended. The mobilization of the Runcandel elite confused even the commanders within the column. Mary Runcandel, the 7th flag bearer, sought intelligence from Diffus, the 4th flag bearer, regarding the sudden deployment. The scale of the force did not align with the strategic value of the storm castle. Their deduction shifted rapidly from the expulsion of the Toma twins to the status of the youngest child, Jin. Diffus recalled a critical data point. During the selection ritual, Jin had chosen the founder's sword, Bear Sada. This detail suggested that the patriarch's visit was not a mere inspection, but an audit of potential. Inside the castle, the subject of this mobilization prepared for the encounter. Jin Runcandel analyzed the variables. He deduced that the guardian knight Kun had submitted a factual report regarding the altercation with the twins. Kun would not have labeled the power magic definitively, but would have described an unidentifiable force. Jin realized that Jin Runcandel was not returning to punish a transgression, but to verify an anomaly. The arrival of the patriarch was absolute. The castle gates opened to reveal Jin Runcandel, flanked by the clan's heavy infantry. His presence demanded total submission. He bypassed all ceremonial pleasantries and immediately summoned the Toma twins. The interrogation was brief and brutal. Jin demanded they identify their error in the conflict with Jin. The twins failed the assessment. They claimed no fault, insisting they were victims of an unfair assault involving forbidden magic. This accusation caused a stir among the flag bearers, as magic is strictly prohibited within the clan's martial doctrine. Jin's judgment, however, fell upon the accusers. He did not punish the twins for their defeat, but for their mindset. He declared their behavior incompatible with the survival instincts required by the Runcandel name. With the twins dismissed in disgrace, the patriarch ordered the appearance of the youngest son. Jin entered the hall. His internal assessment recognized Jin not merely as a father, but as a genius knight, an entity that had transcended humanity to become the avatar of the clan's strength. In his previous life, Jin had been invisible to this man. In this timeline, he intended to enforce recognition. He knelt and addressed Jin as patriarch rather than father. When questioned on this choice, Jin provided a logical defense. The presence of over 100 clan officials and flag bearers dictated that this was a formal military inspection, not a familial visit. This adherence to protocol impressed Luna, the 1st flag bearer, and met with Jin's approval. The patriarch adjusted the parameters, permitting familial address, and posed the same question he had asked the twins. What was the nature of the conflict? Jin's response was a single, decisive word: revenge. The candor of the answer silenced the room. Jin paused, processing the deviation from expected behavior, and then issued a command clearing the hall. The flag bearers and knights withdrew, speculating whether the youngest had passed a hidden test. Alone with the patriarch, the dynamic shifted to interrogation. Jin acknowledged Jin's competence but pivoted to the accusation of magic. He reiterated the clan's law. Magic is forbidden because it prevents a warrior from reaching the pinnacle of swordsmanship. He stated that if Jin had utilized magic, the infraction would not be forgiven. Jin initiated his counter play. He realized that denial was futile against a demigod, but framing was everything. He summoned the dark energy into his hands. He feigned ignorance regarding its classification, presenting it to Jin as a power that existed in the liminal space between aura and magic. He asked the patriarch to help him name it. Jin Runcandel, the strongest swordsman of the era, froze. His pupils dilated in shock. The energy manifesting in the child's hands was not a generic spell. It was the power of Solderit, the god of shadows. More importantly, it was the signature authority once wielded by the Runcandel founder. The anomaly was no longer a violation of the rules. It was the resurrection of the clan's origin. The Patriarch's discovery is about to change everything for Jin, shifting his status from a mere anomaly to the carrier of a lost legacy. In our next video, we'll see Jin uncover an ancient legend hidden beneath the castle and begin his true ascent. If you enjoyed this first look into the Runcandel files, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment with your thoughts.